Welcome back to the Easy English Way. Let me ask you something that might sound familiar. Have you ever spent hours making vocabulary lists? Writing down new words, their meanings, and trying to memorize them? But then, when you try to use these words in real conversation, your mind goes blank? If you're nodding right now, I have some incredible news for you. What if I told you that memorizing vocabulary lists is actually one of the worst ways to learn new words? And what if I told you there's a much easier, more natural way that actually works? Today, I'm going to share something that completely changed how I think about vocabulary learning. And the best part? Your brain is already designed to learn words this way. You just need to know how to use it. But first, let me tell you why this matters so much. Most English learners make the same mistake. They treat vocabulary learning like studying for a math test. They write lists of words with translations. They use flashcards. They repeat words over and over again. But here's the truth that nobody talks about. This method doesn't work for long-term learning. You might remember the words for your next test, but after a few weeks, they're gone. Why does this happen? Well, your brain works in a very specific way. It remembers things that have meaning and context. But when you memorize isolated words from lists, there's no meaning. There's no story. There's no connection to your life. So your brain treats these words like useless information and throws them away. It's like trying to remember a phone number that you'll never call. Your brain says, "This isn't important," and deletes it. But here's where it gets interesting. There's a way to learn vocabulary that your brain loves. And it's the same way you learned your first language. Think about it. When you were a child, nobody gave you vocabulary lists in your native language. You didn't memorize definitions. Instead, you heard words in stories, in conversations, in real situations. And somehow, you learned thousands of words naturally. So the question is, why not learn English vocabulary the same way? And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. The first natural method is reading, but not the way most people think about reading. Now, many English learners make this mistake when they read. They stop at every unknown word. They look it up in the dictionary. They write it down. They try to memorize it immediately. But this actually destroys the natural learning process. When you stop every few seconds, you break the flow. You lose the story. And most importantly, you lose the context that helps your brain understand and remember the word. Instead, here's what you should do. Choose reading materials that are just slightly above your level. This means you understand about 80% of what you read. The other 20% contains new vocabulary. But here's the key. Don't stop for every unknown word. Keep reading. Let your brain guess the meaning from context. Trust that your brain is smart enough to figure things out. For example, imagine you read this sentence. The weather was terrible, so we decided to postpone our picnic. Maybe you don't know the word postpone, but from the context, you can guess it means to delay or move to another time. Your brain makes this connection automatically, and because it learned the word in a meaningful context, it remembers it much better than if you had memorized postpone equals delay from a list. But here's what makes this even more powerful. When you meet the same word in different contexts, your understanding becomes deeper. Maybe next time you read, "The meeting was postponed due to bad weather." Now your brain says, "Ah, I know this word. It means to delay something." However, reading is just the beginning. There's an even more powerful way to learn vocabulary naturally. This brings us to what language experts call comprehensible input. This sounds complicated, but it's actually very simple. Comprehensible input means listening to or watching English content that you can mostly understand, even if you don't know every word. The key word here is mostly. You should understand the general idea, but there should be some new vocabulary too. Think of it like this. If you understand 100% of what you hear, you're not learning new words. If you understand only 30%, it's too difficult and frustrating. But if you understand about 70–80%, magic happens. Your brain uses the words you know to guess the meaning of words you don't know. And because these new words come with emotions, stories, and visual images, your brain remembers them naturally. So where can you find good, comprehensible input? YouTube videos are perfect. Choose channels about topics you enjoy. If you like cooking, watch English cooking videos. If you like travel, watch travel vlogs. If you like science, find simple science explanations. The secret is choosing content where you care about the message, not just the language. When you're interested in what someone is saying, your brain pays attention. And when your brain pays attention, it learns. But here's an important tip. Don't use subtitles in your native language. This stops your brain from making connections between sounds and meanings. Instead, use English subtitles, or better yet, no subtitles at all. Let your brain work. Trust that it can figure things out. This is exactly how children learn their first language. And it works for second languages too. However, there's something you can do to make this process even more effective. The third method is what I call context connection. This is about creating rich, meaningful connections around new vocabulary. Here's how most people learn the word exhausted. They see it in a vocabulary list. They learn it means very tired. They try to memorize this definition, but there's no life in this method. Instead, imagine you learn exhausted by watching a video about someone climbing a mountain. You see the person breathing heavily. You hear them say, "I'm completely exhausted." You understand from the context, the facial expressions, and the situation. Now your brain has a complete picture. Exhausted isn't just very tired. It's connected to heavy breathing, mountain climbing, physical effort, and achievement. Your brain has multiple ways to remember and use this word, but you can create these connections yourself. When you meet a new word, don't just learn its definition. Ask yourself questions like, where might I use this word? What situations is it connected to? How does it make me feel? For example, if you learn the word cozy, don't just memorize comfortable and warm. Instead, think about cozy places you know. Maybe your bedroom on a cold day. Maybe a small cafe with soft lighting. Maybe sitting by a fireplace with a good book. This creates what I call a vocabulary web in your brain. Each word is connected to experiences, emotions, and other words. And the more connections you make, the stronger your memory becomes. But there's another technique that works incredibly well with this. The fourth natural method uses something your brain loves: emotions and stories. Your brain remembers emotional experiences much better than neutral information. This is why you remember your best and worst days clearly, but you forget what you had for lunch last Tuesday. So, how can you use this for vocabulary learning? Simple. Connect new words to emotions and stories, even if they're imaginary ones. Let's say you want to learn the word grateful. Instead of memorizing grateful equals thankful, create a little story. Maybe you imagine being grateful for a friend who helped you during a difficult time. Maybe you remember a moment when you felt truly grateful for something in your life. This emotional connection makes the word stick in your memory. But it does something even more important. It helps you understand not just what the word means, but how it feels and when to use it. Here's another example. The word frustrated is much easier to remember if you connect it to a real situation. Maybe you remember feeling frustrated when your computer stopped working. Maybe you imagine the frustration of being stuck in traffic when you're late. Now, when you need to use frustrated in conversation, your brain doesn't just remember a definition. It remembers the feeling, the situation, the context. This makes your English sound much more natural and confident. But there's one more technique that brings everything together. The fifth method is about moving from passive learning to active use. And this is where most vocabulary learning programs fail. Most people learn new words by reading or listening. This is called passive learning. But to really own a word, you need to use it actively. You need to speak it, write it, and make it yours. However, this doesn't mean forcing yourself to use new words in artificial ways. Instead, create natural opportunities to use them. For example, if you learn the word delicious from a cooking video, use it when you talk about food. If you learn exhausted from a story about work, use it when you talk about your own tiring days. But here's a powerful technique. Talk to yourself using new vocabulary. When you're cooking, say, "This smells delicious." When you're tired after work, say, "I'm exhausted." When you see a comfortable room, say, "This looks cozy." This self-talk might feel strange at first, but it's incredibly effective. You're giving your brain practice using words in real situations. And because there's no pressure or judgment, you can experiment freely. You can also write about your experiences using new vocabulary. Keep a simple diary where you describe your day. When you learned postpone from your reading, write, "I had to postpone my meeting today." This active use makes the word truly yours. Now, let me show you how all these methods work together in what I call the natural learning cycle. First, you encounter new words through reading or comprehensible input. Your brain makes initial connections based on context. This is passive exposure. Then, you meet these words again in different contexts. Each time, your understanding becomes deeper and more complete. This is repeated exposure. Next, you start using the words yourself in speaking or writing. This moves them from passive knowledge to active use. Finally, these words become part of your natural vocabulary. You don't think about them anymore. You just use them. This cycle happens automatically when you follow natural learning methods. But it never happens with memorization, because memorization skips the most important steps: context, emotion, and active use. But here's what makes this approach so powerful. You're not just learning individual words. You're learning how words work together, how they feel, and how to use them naturally. This creates fluent, natural English, not robotic, memorized phrases. So how can you use these methods in your daily routine? Let me give you a simple plan that takes just 30 minutes a day. Spend 15 minutes reading something you enjoy. It could be news articles, blog posts, or simple stories. Remember, don't stop for every unknown word. Let your brain guess from context. Then spend 15 minutes watching English videos about topics that interest you. Focus on understanding the main ideas, not every single word. Throughout the day, notice when you use new vocabulary in your thoughts. If you learned postpone from your reading, and later you need to delay something, think, "I need to postpone this," instead of thinking in your native language. Once a week, spend a few minutes writing about your experiences using vocabulary you've learned recently. This helps move words from passive knowledge to active use. The key is consistency, not intensity. Learning vocabulary naturally is like growing a plant. You can't force it to grow faster, but with regular care and the right conditions, it grows strong and healthy. Here's the most important truth about vocabulary learning. Your brain already knows how to do this. You learned thousands of words in your native language without flashcards or vocabulary lists. You learned them through context, emotions, and natural use. The problem is that traditional language teaching makes us forget this natural ability. It convinces us that learning must be difficult, boring, and mechanical. But this isn't true. Natural vocabulary learning is actually enjoyable. When you learn words through interesting content, it doesn't feel like studying. It feels like entertainment. And because you're enjoying the process, you stick with it longer and learn more effectively. So stop fighting against your brain's natural learning ability. Stop forcing yourself to memorize lists of words. Instead, trust your brain to do what it does best. Learn language naturally through context, meaning, and use. Here's my challenge for you today. Choose one method we discussed and try it right now. Maybe find an English video about something that interests you. Maybe start reading a simple article about your hobby. Maybe begin talking to yourself using English words you already know. It doesn't matter which method you choose. What matters is that you start trusting your brain's natural learning ability. Because the difference between learners who build strong vocabularies and those who struggle with memorization is simple. They work with their brain, not against it. If this video helped you understand that vocabulary learning can be natural and enjoyable, please give it a like and subscribe to The Easy English Way. In the comments, tell me which natural method you want to try first. I read every comment and love to hear about your learning journey. Remember, you don't need perfect memory to build great vocabulary. You just need to trust your brain's natural learning ability. And now you know exactly how to do that. Your natural vocabulary learning adventure starts today. Trust your brain, enjoy the process, and watch your vocabulary grow naturally. Until next time, keep learning, keep trusting yourself, and keep making English the easy way.